Welcome everybody. My name is AJ Lanyon. I am the Program Manager for Cross-Cutting Statistical Infrastructure within the Australian Bureau of Statistics. What does that mean? It means that I am responsible for some key national standards and standard classifications, like the Australian-New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupation, ANZSCO. And I'm also responsible for developing and supporting ABS's internal machine learning capability for use across the ABS. We're here today to talk with you about an opportunity that has been given to us to develop a whole of government coding capability for use with ANZSCO in the first instance. And we'd like to take you through a presentation today around the coding services capability, our consultation timeframe, and how you might help us understand what use cases there are across government and industry to use such a coding capability. But before I do go much further, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to their cultures and elders past, present and emerging, and I would also like to extend my acknowledgement to anybody from an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander background today as a part of this meeting. I'm going to hand now to Andy Johnson, who's our very able business analyst supporting us on this project. And he's going to take us through a presentation. At the bottom of the slides, you will see a Poll EV link. If you have any questions, please pop them into that Poll EV and Gwyn will help share those at the end of Andy's presentation, and I'll do a bit of traffic control in terms of where I throw, to whom I throw to answer those questions. Over to you, Andy.
Great, thanks AJ. And before I get started, as AJ mentioned, Poll EV is there for any questions, but we're also interested in any comments you've got as we go through the presentation, any positive feedback on the on the CODA service itself, or any challenges that that you might see. We're interested in any feedback that you do have. So in terms of project background, many of you will be aware, ANZSCO, the Standard Classification of Occupations, underpins occupational-based labour market data. And there are a number of key data assets that use the classification, including census, personal income tax data at the ATO, and workforce development and skills data. Currently, there's no consistent coding of occupation data, and those official data producers spend non-trivial resources to manually code emerging occupations or establish and maintain the coders. So in 2022-23, the ABS secured funding to do a couple of things. First is to update the ANZSCO classification, so review and update so that official data reflects contemporary Australian occupations. And the second, which we're here to talk about, is to deliver a contemporary whole of Australian government coding capability. So that's an API-driven vision. The vision's for a single occupation coder across government, industry and the community, creating coherence across the occupation data assets and reducing efforts of data producers. The coder itself will be built with contemporary machine learning technology, which will improve automated coding quality both now and in the future. And importantly, and I'll get into this a bit further, but latest versions, so the coder will facilitate a wide adoption of the forthcoming ANZSCO classification scheduled for December 2024. So it's important to recognise that there's a few projects in flight at ABS at the moment. The first being that comprehensive review and classification update, and the release of that, as I mentioned before, by December 2024, which is being informed through public consultations from now to August 24. This presentation and session is about item 3. So if you do have any questions around the classification update and review, please do forward those to updating.anzsco@abs.gov.au, and the team will pick up those questions. The second, which you may have had some involvement with or some consultation with, is a customized viewer tool, which is in discovery phase. And that tool is not a coding service. It's a tool to enable manipulation, grouping, rearranging of classification metadata that creates a custom view. So an example of use of that might be to see all ANZSCO occupations for a particular industry by linking ANZSIC and ANZSCO. And the third, which I'm presenting on today, is the whole of Australian government coding service. We're in requirements phase and moving fast into build phase. And as I mentioned before, it's an API service using machine learning to automatically code to ANZSCO based on a user's occupation entry within a source system or application. We are also considering, as part of our consultation, the ability to use that API to code larger data sets in bulk by making multiple API calls. So in terms of what that looks like in picture form, on the left-hand side here, there are a number of different potential users. So a user on a web form or an application could be government or industry, or a database of occupation codes that needs coding. And the idea of the coder is to handle those emerging occupations, any ambiguous entries or incorrect entries, which will be sent to through the API to the ABS intelligent coder, which has been trained from over 20 million text records, and as I mentioned before, underpinned by supervised machine learning to provide an accurate classification coding back to source. Some of the benefits around that are obviously easy and efficient reporting across the ecosystem, more accurate data analysis, and really importantly, data coherence for an integrated and connected Australian data landscape. So what do we mean by that, and what's the big why as to why we're doing this? There's a number of very large government organisations. There's some state government organisations and research and industry and beyond. If the classification is standardized across those, you get a much deeper, more coherent and more accurate insights across a much wider and connected range of topics. So just to make it simple as well, coding at source. So connecting a web form to our API service, a user typing in their particular occupation and being returned with occupations. So there'll be an up-to-date comprehensive coding service coded at source in real time, and really importantly, maintained and updated by the ABS. An indicative roadmap, and we're very keen on collaborative design. So we're working through engagement. So this is awareness, collecting user stories, which I'll get to as a call out in a bit, and collecting requirements, moving fast into architecture and high level design, considering cloud hosting, the security, privacy and performance, through to a design review, collaborative design and product build, and into platform and pipeline testing in Q3 2024, with a launch for the 2022 ANZSCO release in Q4 2024, and then followed in Q2 2025 with the 2024 release. So we have already done some consultation, and to date that's led us to 3 main use cases. The first is that real-time web form entry coding, so providing a a list of best match occupation codes for a user typing text within a government or industry online form or application. The second is large dataset coding, which is to accurately code a large data set of either free text or previously coded data, so retrospectively, to occupation codes. Or an ad hoc lookup, a place where someone can go to find an accurate classification code for the occupation. So importantly, we'd really like to collect feedback and user stories to understand how the service can or might work in your particular environment. So this is a slightly more technical description. On the left-hand side, a free API service open to government and industry. And again, as we go through design and architecture, we'll work out the service. It'd be connected to a website or web form, making a single API call using free text typed by the user, which would hit the RESTful Web Services API and into our machine learning engine and processing and the intelligent coder. And then coded responses are returned back into that, that website or web form. On the right-hand side here is something under consideration, which is a token-based API service for permissioned users only, whereby you would connect a database or data set and make a series of API calls, having those occupations coded and returned to you into your environment. So as I mentioned before, what's really important for us is to collect the user stories, and this is a call out to government and industry. What a user story is, for those who are unfamiliar, is a very simple description of I am this type of user. I need to be able to do this so that when this happens, I can achieve that. An example of that might be as a user visiting a government website with an interest in applying for available work that relates to my occupation. I want to know which jobs my role might align to and trust that the coder will give me the right choices so that I can be presented with jobs that are highly relevant to me. And what's also key in collecting those user stories is the types of systems or forms or applications that affects. If there are any upstream or downstream data flows that are affected, and also obviously what benefits you can realize from implementing this. So a second part to the user story is, you know, the result. So what are you expecting to get from that? So, you know, given that my actual job title is quite specific and I have no knowledge of ANZSCO coding as that user, I type my job title into the web form field. I should be presented with a closely aligned list of occupation codes. Then I can confidently select my occupation code and feel comfortable I've submitted the required information accurately. Again, this is just an example. The examples could be very broad and very wide. You may have some user stories that relate more to your role as a data analyst or data processor. As I mentioned before, we're considering those bulk coding opportunities. So your specific user story may be more aligned to that. So next steps really. We're obviously interested in being connected with the right people across other agencies and ANZSCO users. So please do share this with colleagues and other interested parties. We will be putting a call out to ask you to detail user stories and send them to us. And it's important to note that a user story is sometimes just the beginning of a conversation. It's to frame your use of ANZSCO coding, and for us to be able to make contact and deeply understand what it is you're trying to achieve and how our service could potentially work in your environment. There's also an opportunity if you want to participate in any testing activities as we progress through the project. And our commitment is to send you that user stories template for completion. We'll actively be looking to collect those, and we'll be sending out a format for that. And then to analyze those requirements, consider the functionality required, and obviously keep you up to date with progress in similar formats to today. So just on the bottom here, Gwyn's email is here, is available for you to email. If we don't happen to answer one of your questions today, please do email them through, and we'll get back to you. If there's any comments or feedback, or you feel like you need deeper consultation, please let us know through Gwyn. So
Thanks,
Gwyn,
thanks,
sorry,
Andy.
AJ.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was great. Yep.
Awesome. So I know that was a quick presentation. We've tried to keep it very simple. We'd love to hear some of the questions or comments. I'll just ask Gwyn to jump on to see if we have any questions or comments so far.
So I have a question. Can you hear me all right? Yes. There's a couple of questions. Will there be security issues for our agency or organisation connecting to the ABS via an API?
Very important question, Gwyn. Thanks for the person who asked that. I'll take that one. ABS takes security very, very seriously. So obviously any service that we would provide would be security tested and as secure as we could possibly make it. Certainly in line with ABS's strict security and confidentiality rules regarding the handling of data and personal information under the Census and Statistics Act. The service will be designed to meet those strict control standards, as well as current government security and accessibility standards.
Any other questions, Gwyn?
Yeah, you might be on mute, Gwyn.
I am on mute. I seem to have lost my PolEV, but I do have one more question before I do go and look for it. So it will be, how will we protect our clients' data? That's the question.
Sterling, do you want to take that one?
Yep, sure thing. Just trying to make sure my mic was turned on as well. Yeah, look, data provided to and processed by the coding service will be stored in memory only. And while being processed, it will not be retained by the ABS. So the data entered into the coding service belongs to the agency requesting the data to be coded and will remain securely with the agent and return to the agency in the same fashion.
Cool. I have another question. Would you be able to expand on the process to access the secure API and limitations in terms of data volume, calls, etc.?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one too.
Yeah,
AJ.
go, sir.
Yes.
Go.
So it's the standard API platform. There's a couple of options that we're considering. The first is that an open API service, and that would be for live coding and for the majority of users to use and embed into their collection services. The other is a registered service that would require agencies to actually register and provide information to us, and potentially a paid service. We're not sure yet how that will pan out. That would provide the ability to perform bulk data coding in addition to live coding. The open API service would potentially have a throttle on it to control the amount of calls that can be made in a given period, whereas the registered service would be more open. And that's largely just to protect the service from, I guess, inappropriate use and to ensure that it's performant and high and can handle the loads and deliver the short turnaround, so 1 second response times that we're anticipating for the actual real-time coding service.
Thanks, Sterling. Another question, will the slides be available? I can answer this one, absolutely. I'll probably send the slides out to everyone that's attended today, if that's okay. And we might also be sending a user stories template for anyone to get back to us if they can as well. Another question, an important element of coding and grouping is reproducibility. For example, the coding logic for health record coders are often public, so coding outcomes can be understood. How does this mesh with machine learning? Do you want me to?
Sterling?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and get that one too.
Yeah.
Okay, so the machine learning coding engine that we've developed is trained using standardized training data. And what we're actually doing is leveraging from census responses for particular topics. For occupation, we're obviously using the occupation response where people have responded to the tasks that they performed in their occupation or the occupation that they've reported that they work in. And we're using those responses to train the machine learning coder to be able to accurately code information. So in a nutshell, it's actually, the machine learning is not like a pure AI technology that can try and make sense using outside information. It's trained using information that we've actually controlled and filtered and intentionally fed it to make sure it can do accurate coding for that topic.
And I think it's important to add, Sterling, check me if I'm wrong on this, but for the ABS, understanding how we arrive at certain coding outcomes is really important. That explainability and defensibility is absolutely key, and it's one of the criteria that we take very seriously through this project. So whoever asked that question, if you wanted to follow up with Gwyn, and we could organise a bit more of a deeper dive about that, very happy to. The project is a multidisciplinary project, so Sterling and Gwyn, Andy are here as my representatives on that project, but we also have our methodology area who has a lot of experience in machine learning as a key partner for this project. And of course, we have our census area represented as well, and census are very explainability and defensibility is extremely important for census as well. So I hope that helps understand, that we take that side of things very seriously.
Thanks, AJ. Another question is, how would you like to interact with industry? Industry-based use cases being sought? I would say absolutely, but does anyone want to expand on that?
Yeah, look, in the same fashion, if you can get in contact with Gwyn and we can send you out the templates and just try and capture your use cases as best you can, and we can unpack them further if needs be.
Oh, and AJ, there's a response to you saying, thanks, happy to follow up from the previous question. Thanks for that.
Great.
So who would be the best person to discuss and explore the registered service with? This is from PSC in WA.
I'd say that. Yeah, you go.
I was just gonna say Gwyn. Gwyn's the external contact for all queries with regards to use cases and identifying people who'd like to be involved in the project moving forward. So by all means, send Gwyn a message and we can either have another conversation with you directly and unpack your questions directly. I think that's probably the best bet.
Right.
Okay. How long will coding take?
I think that's you, Sterling. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's fine. So it depends on the type of coding you're looking to perform. Our target for live or real-time coding is 1 second response times. And the idea behind that is that if it's embedded into an online form, you don't want users to be waiting around for it to try and predict responses. It needs to be performant, it needs to be fast, so to make it usable. Otherwise, you're potentially going to do more damage than good by making it a more complex service to use, where the idea is actually to make it simpler for users. The batch coding service or registered service would be a little bit different, because we'd have to introduce some kind of a queuing system, because if you've got multiple agencies with very large data sets all trying to process them at the same time, whilst we do have a cloud technology so that the computational power behind the coder is expandable where it's needed to, we do need to be able to manage a reasonable response time to all users. So we would introduce some kind of queuing system. But as an example, the coder has been tested to recode census data, which for occupation is about 11.8 million records, and it does that in a few minutes.
Amazing. Can you use the code? Could you use the coder in a survey form as well as a web form, an online survey form?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the intention. It's a relatively new idea for the ABS. We don't tend to have predictive text responses in a lot of our instruments because of the potential to lead responses. However, depending on what you're trying to capture, and certainly for when you people responding to online forms and just entering in their occupation, or you're just trying to capture the information, absolutely, that's the intent behind the real-time coding service.
Will the ABS update the ANZSCO classification more regularly because the machine coding will pick up new occupations and need new categories?
So I'll take that one, Gwyn. It's a great question. So I think we need to tease these two things apart a bit, the coder and how we capture emerging occupations. So the coder service will be updated following the release of a new version of the classification, but the coder is not related to the classification update process. So they are separate things. ABS is looking to instigate, as you may be aware, a rolling update of ANZSCO as a classification so that it stays as up to date and as accurate as possible over time. And as Andy said, we're currently out for consultation on the 2024 update in time, trying to release it in time for Census 2026 use in the next census. So that will be available in December 2024. Following each release of the classification, the coding service will be updated by default to the latest classification. Older released versions of the classification already available in the coder will remain available to select via a toggle in the API if we get that far. So that is one of the shoulds in our backlog at the moment. So that's our intention. But as Andy also outlined in his slides, and we'll send these out to you later on, the first release of the coder, right, Andy, is going to use ANZSCO 2022, and then there'll be a further release of the coder to pick up December 2024 version when it's available. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. And yeah, we'll send out the slides, and I mean some of those dates are indicative because of the project constraints and the fact we're in design, but that's an indicative guide to the timeline. Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have another question. Sorry if I've missed this on the slides. Do you have API web service currently available for our testing?
Not yet. That would be part of the post-development process. So once we've actually got a service in place, we'll be reaching out to those people who've put their hand up to partake in some testing and get them to actually have a go, embed it, have a play with it, and make sure it does what they're anticipating to do, and then to provide any feedback for the final version. Just to note, though, we do have an API service available for the ANZSCO classification at the moment. It's quite an old coding service that will be, I think, intentionally similar, but improved on the older version.
How will we protect our clients' data?
Did you want to take that, Sterling?
Yep, sure. So this is similar to the, I guess, the other question that was posed earlier, in that we do have very strict privacy, confidentiality, and data protection controls in the ABS. And this project is no different to any other standard ABS project. So any data that's being handled will be handled in line with the rules and regulations that we abide by under the Census and Statistics Act. So the data from our side of the API service will absolutely be protected. And the other thing is it's not retained as part of this coding service. It's only held in memory for the purpose of the transaction, and then it's returned and sent out and destroyed.
Thank you.
I'll just add to that, Sterling, as well. It's free text occupation data that's being sent to us, and not anything outside of that.
Yeah, great clarification, Andy. Yeah, there's no personal information that's retained. It's only the text that's actually intended to be coded.
There's a question that's just it's popped up again, but it's the same question as before, so sorry about that. Could research organisations send survey data for coding?
So that would be largely a batch or bulk coding service. So we would require that they were registered, but there's no reason why they couldn't register to do that.
Can anyone use the service or just government agencies? So that was kind of answered in that last one, that researchers can use it as well, but if I can throw that out. I could actually answer this one myself. Anyone can use the service. We're consulting with government, education and industry sectors so that we can get as broad an idea as possible of user and system requirements, because we really want efficient, consistent national data coding. And this is fantastic for data linkage and coherence and all sorts of things, as Andy mentioned in the slides.
Yeah, so that point about being registered is key, I think, here for that as well, right, Sterling? Yep.
Yeah, look at the live real-time coding service for people to embed into their collection services doesn't really need to be registered.
Yep.
But if you're looking to do like bulk or large data set coding, then absolutely it would have to be a registered service. And I think you need to consider the volume that you're actually looking, like, for example, ATO embedding the coding service into their tax collection systems. That's very high volume. They'd absolutely want to use a registered service and make sure that there's no throttling that might impact on the performance. But yeah, I guess that's the only thing to really consider. And if you've, as with anybody else, if you've got questions, let's shoot Gwyn a message and we can actually unpack it and work out what exactly your use case is.
Will there be a limit on how many API calls we can make per month or per day?
So again, yeah, that comes to the throttling. And the intention here is not to degrade performance, it's actually to protect performance so that people can't write robots that just constantly hit the service and choke it up. So that there'll be reasonable throttling with the intention to protect the ongoing performance of the system.
Would ABS charge for the service?
So the intention at the moment is that the open real-time coding service would be a free to use service that anyone can use. It's not determined yet whether or not the batch coding or registered service would be a pay to use service because of the additional security requirements that are required to be able to process large volume text, and also the additional computational requirement because we need to allocate more cloud services. And if anyone's actually done any work with cloud services, they know that cloud isn't free. So we just need to manage that to ensure that we can afford to run the service ongoing.
Are you able to tell us how the ANZSCO suggested codes, how the ANZSCO suggests codes return to users? For example, are they returned based on the probability that the suggested code matches the user's input?
So that's where the machine learning coder comes into it. It's quite a complicated machine learning algorithm that happens in the coding, but effectively what it does is weigh up the text that's been entered against the text it's been trained on, and then the algorithm will calculate the most likely best match code, and then generate that list. And it will generate, depending on how you toggle the API, the intention is that you would be able to select either the best match, so it might just return one code and description for your text, or you should be able to select the top 5 codes and descriptions in order of their best match, or alternatively, you should be able to select a toggle that allows you to get all of the responses. I guess that realistically here we're thinking about the different use cases that it might be applied, because if someone starts typing into a response field in a form and they've only entered 4 characters, the potential could be very broad, and that there's a big long list, and you don't want to overwhelm the user with a very long list, depending on the use case. So yeah, the idea here is that we give you a range of options.
Any more questions, Gwyn? Or we think we're
Not so far. I think
okay.
that's Yep.
Well, I think if there are no further questions today, we might close it off there. It's a busy time of the year heading into the end of the financial year, so I'm sure you'd love to have some time back in your day. Again, thank you to everybody for joining. Thank you for asking those questions. We hope that you've found it informative. As Gwyn said, we will send out the slides. We will send out some templates for capturing user stories. And once the recording is available, we will also provide that to registrants. And if you think that there's somebody out there through your networks who might find this kind of service and capability of value, please feel free to share the link to the webinar with them, the slides, the information we provide you, because we're keen to really understand where the strong use cases are and coalesce to providing a capability that can meet a number of people's needs. We're not going to be able to meet everybody's needs, managing expectations, but it's a really important opportunity, not only for the ABS, but more particularly for users of Australia's data and labour market data in the first instance. In terms of extensibility, over time, we would like to be able to grow this capability, but we need to take that stepwise and see what other opportunities there are down the track, for example, for industry coding. But let's just focus on getting this coder out the door and of value to people across Australia. And yeah, shoot Gwyn an email if you want to have some follow-up discussions. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Sterling. Thanks, Gwyn. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.